Good morning. First and foremost, I want to thank all of you for taking time out of your day to join us for this webinar. I do want to apologize for having to reschedule the webinar from last Tuesday, but due to Hurricane Irma, it was necessary. And we do hope that all of you fared well, and we do keep the victims in this disaster close to our thoughts. On a higher note, before I continue on to the next slide, I did want to point out that the picture of these lovely ladies is my team. They are account managers, sales managers, and assistants. So they make all of Quality Consulting Group flow very well. Next, I want to talk to you a little bit about your control panel. In the upper, on the upper right-hand corner of your monitor, you have an attendee interface. You're listening in using your computer's audio speaker by default. However, if you'd like to join over the phone, just click on telephone in the audio pane and dial-in information will be displayed. If you'd like to minimize your GoToMeeting or your GoToWebinar control panel, you can click on that orange arrow at the top left-hand corner of that control panel and it will shrink to the side. If you want to reopen it again, you just click on it and it'll come back. Kelly will be monitoring the chat section of the webinar in case anybody has any technical issues. In the chat, you can privately message her and she will be willing to help you. You will have the opportunity to submit your text questions to me by typing the questions in the questions pane of the control panel. You may send in your questions at any time during this presentation. We will collect them and address them during our Q&A at the end of the presentation. Oops. Today's objectives. First thing is going to be talking a little bit about myself. Next, we'll meet Kelly. Then we'll be going into the meat of the information is understanding the differences between the Enterprise and Premier version of Contractors versus the QuickBooks Online or Pro. Also be understanding the job preferences, specifically to the customer jobs, and your contractor-specific preferences. Next, we will look at creating the customers and jobs and the difference between the two, managing and customizing the job reports, and then also reviewing the job links in your reports in your jobs themselves. Now, just a little bit about myself. I established Quality Consulting Group in 1997, so in January we'll be in business 21 years. I became one of the first pro advisors in 1998 and then became one of the first certified pro advisors in 1999, and the word pro advisor is an Intuit designation. I became one of the first original 64 Intuit Premier resellers in 2005, and now that partner program is called the Intuit Premier Reseller. And we have over 5,000 customers across the US and in several countries. A little bit about Ms. Kelly Fry. She joined our team in December of last year. She is our concierge sales manager. She makes sure that all of you, when you call in, that you're in the right edition for you and at the best price available. And with her analytics background, that helps her guide you and discover what is the best product for you. A little bit about the services that we provide. We provide QuickBooks hosting, and we can host your data file and auxiliary data with that, like PDF file, Excel file, Word files, all of those on essentially a desktop in the cloud. And that's cross platforms between PC, Mac, iPad, iPhone, your Android. So anywhere you have internet, you can access your QuickBooks data and all of those documents via our hosting service. We also offer bookkeeping. We offer those at we tailor them to our clients' needs. So whatever they're looking for, we do, whether it's a daily bookkeeping, short-term, long-term, partial, just doing accounts payable, whatever it is, we do that for you. We also offer write-up services, which most people know them shoebox clients. If you collect all your data in a bin or a box, give it to us. We get it all into your accounting system and get you neat reports printed out. We also offer consulting using GoToMeeting, very similar to the GoToWebinar, or on-site. We train you at any aspect of QuickBooks that you need to know about, and we also teach you how to properly manage your accounting. And last but not least is file services. So whether it's shrinking your file, repairing your file, upgrading, conversions, and downgrading, we do all of that. A little bit about the products that we service and sell. We sell all of the QuickBooks products, including Pro, Premier, and Enterprise, which are the PC-based, Mac, of course, Mac-based, the online, and then the point of sale products. We have QuickBooks point of sale desktop, and then we also sell the Rebel systems, which is an iPad-based system. Checks, deposit tickets, and envelopes, they are all Intuit branded products and always at 35% off, which is better than you can get anywhere else. And we also provide at discount 1099s, W-2s, and other IRS forms and publications. The great thing is that we offer that all at 24/7 online at theqbshop.com. So if you're interested, either give us a call or shop online. Now, going into what we're discussing today is the difference. The first we're going to talk about is the difference between the contractor version of Premier and Enterprise versus QuickBooks Online and Pro. We recently attended the SEBC trade show. We were vendors there, and we found that several of the several hundred that stopped by our booth had converted from either the Premier or Enterprise over to the online because it was, the thing to do. And once they did convert to online, they found that it had a lot of limitations for the contractors. So I wanted to make sure I addressed that on this, contractor-specific training. So some limitations with QBO is that you're not able to create change orders like you are in the desktop edition. You're unable to create multiple invoices, so progress invoicing from your estimates. It's a one-time shot to convert it over. And the job reports are extremely limited. In fact, the reports in general are pretty limited. They have some prefabbed reports, I don't know, maybe 20, 25 or so. And a lot of them can be modified and filtered, but it takes time and whatnot. And a recent client that we've been working with that is on the online edition and is in construction, we found that when she was trying to get a CPA to get access to her QuickBooks online file, somehow the support team with the QBO removed all of her memorized reports, and she probably had, I would say, at least 50 memorized and customized reports that were completely wiped out. So that was, if I hadn't seen it for myself, I wouldn't have believed it, but it was pretty scary to see that. And then general issues with QuickBooks Online, and we get a lot of feedback. I'm not an online proponent, but we do get a lot of feedback that it's web-based, it's slow, you can't have multiple screens open at one time, it's not intuitive, not user-friendly. So we get a lot of that feedback. I would say that if you're ever interested in QBO, we can set you up for a free trial. You can convert a copy of your data just to see if that would be something that you would want to do. As far as the desktop, QuickBooks Pro, which is Pro is the entry level of the desktop editions. It doesn't have an industry-specific contractor edition, and it also does not have the ability to track the liability and workers' compensation expiration dates. Now, going into the Premier and Enterprise, it does have the industry-specific option of construction, which once you install the product and open it the first time, that's when you get to select your edition. So the construction-specific edition does have the liability and workers' compensation expiration warning option, and you can see in this image here that in a vendor, under the additional info tab, it does have both of those expiration dates. And what's great about that is that if you try and enter a bill in after those expiration dates, it'll flag you, it'll warn you saying that you're entering a bill in after they're expired. So that's a great feature for you. It does also have the industry-specific memorized report group, and also, which we'll be going to later on in the presentation, and then also an industry-specific report section. The Enterprise, specifically over the Premier, has the ability to have up to 30 different users in your file, it has advanced users and role restrictions, which kind of goes hand in hand with the 30 users. You might have project managers, you might have office and billing people, you might have salespeople, you might have a variety of those people that you only want them to have a little bit of access into those different areas that they need, but not access to see your banking information or payroll information. Well, with QuickBooks Enterprise, it allows you advanced user restrictions, and regular Pro and Premier has 9 to 10 different levels, where Enterprise has over 100, and I want to say it's close to 150 different levels. So it's a very big difference. It also has unlimited list elements. So if you have multiple items, the Pro and Premier have a list limit of 10,000 for each type, but a total of 14,500. So, you know, we meet a lot of people that do reach those thresholds when they do fully use QuickBooks. And then, of course, Enterprise has so much more. If you're ever interested in looking at Enterprise, we do have free demonstrations. So I'd be happy to share those if it's a need that you think you might have. Next is going into the job costing preferences. So we'll go into it live, but I'll just share briefly what we see here. That's the pathway is the first one. So it's edit, preferences, and then the job and estimates. And it is on the company tab. And I just want to point out that because it's on the company tab, you have to be in single user mode. You also have to be either the administrator or what's considered an external accountant to be able to access that, that section and make changes on there. You also have 5 status fields, and the status fields, again, I'll go in and show you how to change them, but it's the pending, the awarded, the in progress, closed, and not awarded. Those are all customizable, and each one can have up to 9 characters. You also have estimate options, whether you want to have estimates show on your home page or if you don't. If you don't want to have that little icon, if you don't do estimating in QuickBooks, you can say no, and it'll take that, that icon away. The secondary option is, do you do progress invoicing? Do you do, you know, putting 10% down or 30% down, or do you do it by line item? You're going to do, you know, bill them for the foundation or the mobilization. That allows you to do either by quantity or by percentage. And then also, if you have fully used the estimating and you don't want to have the lines that maybe you convert the whole thing over, but you're only converting either a percentage or maybe just the quantity for a couple different lines. And if there's no quantity on the other ones, you don't want it to print or email out to your customers. You might see it on your screen, but you're not going to see it. Your customers won't see that. So let me go in to actually show you in the live file those preference options. The first thing that you'll do is you'll click on the edit, and then you'll go down to preferences. You'll notice that there are several different preferences. Now, of course, we're not going to go through all of them today. We're going to focus just on the jobs and estimates preference, but I would encourage you to go through those different preferences, and under the My Preferences, it's going to be anything that each user that logs into QuickBooks has the ability to change for them uniquely. Versus the company preferences, which is what we're going to look at for this preference. That is, again, where you have to be an admin, single user mode, or an external accountant to make those changes. But the company preferences affect all of the users. So when you make changes in here, that affects every user. So what I did is I already had gone in here in practice and changed it from pending to quoted, because pending doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, you sent out a quote. I like to have it more traditionally of what your wording or your verbiage is. So you quoted it, or the quote is, you know, active. And awarded might not be what you want to choose either, or maybe you have more than, you know, awarded isn't something that you would do other than maybe in progress. So maybe your in progress would be your awarded, and maybe the now old in progress might be invoiced or invoiced full, something, you know, within the 9 characters. Something that fits in the 9 characters that is the process of how you would do your business. Closed might be, you know, something different. I'll leave it like this, but you can think about how this might work for you, and you'll see where this plays in the actual job information. So anyways, once you're done making those modifications, you can click on OK. Oh, and by the way, it doesn't change the word, the hard coding of where it says pended and awarded. That's going to stay there, but what you see in the job is going to actually make a difference. and we'll be coming back to that. Next is creating the customers and the jobs. So with the customer, if let's say you're a contractor and you have different clients, those might be who you create as a customer. And then underneath the customer, it's the jobs that you do for those customers, whether it's building a house or remodeling a kitchen or remodeling a bathroom or putting up a garage. But if you're a sub, then that might be the contractors, your GCs might be your primary customer, and then the jobs that you're doing for those GCs would be the jobs underneath it. You create the job, and also if you have a need to, let me give you another example. It might not be more in the contractor business, but you can have a hierarchy of 5 levels deep. And when I say that, I'm going to give an example of, say, a company that repairs vehicles. Well, their customer would be the name of the customer, and then they might have different locations. Maybe they have a Tampa location, an Orlando location, and a St. Pete location. That would be the first level of the job. So then underneath that, you might have, say, all the trucks. All the different trucks can be maybe by VIN number. So then, in the hierarchy level, you're looking at 3 levels deep, and then you're tracking by location, whether it's Orlando, Tampa, or St. Pete. You're tracking the truck, and then maybe even within the truck, you're tracking maybe different service orders or tickets. So that's only 4 levels deep. So if you can imagine how detailed you can have your job set up to be able to track things a little bit better. And the other thing that helps is when you create that customer and then you create the jobs underneath it, it carries down all the information from the customer into the job. So I want to show how that looks live in QuickBooks. I'm going to create my name as a customer. And then I'm going to add a job. So I have my customer, and now I'm going to add a job. And you can right-click. It's usually what I suggest is right-clicking on the job. So I'm going to call this garage. And then if I wanted to add a job on top of a garage, I can do that too. I can just say, maybe it's the roof. Maybe I'm actually breaking down into maybe different parts of that job. I wouldn't, necessarily say that that if I'm building a garage, I wouldn't break it down in here as, foundation roof. That's not what I'm saying here. I'm just saying that, of the garage, maybe you're just doing the roof as that job. But maybe in the bathroom, maybe you'll be doing another renovation, another job later on, called a bathroom. So you can see where you can start adding the different jobs, keeping track of that. And then, when you're done with those jobs, you can make them inactive, but the customer still stays active for, potentially marketing or, doing another job down the road. I'm going to talk a little bit about how you can format this in here and just the view that you're seeing here, so that you can maybe add on some practices that you're doing. Now, when I'm logged in as the admin or as your user, the customization that I'm going to show you in here is going to be for only your user login. So if you want other people or your other employees to make those changes, they can do that themselves as well. So in let's say let me add on the garage under a job that actually has information. You'll see Heather Campbell's information, and I'm going to add on, say, a job, again, the garage for Heather. You'll also have the job info tab, and I recommend using this. There's several different benefits, and I'll show that in the actual reporting of it. But let's just say this is the garage, and this is maybe renovation, maybe it's an old garage. Oops. You also have the job type, which is what we just excuse me, this is not the job type. So the job type is actually something that you can add multiple, you can add hundreds and hundreds. I think it's up to 10,000 different job types. So if there was something, maybe this is a tear down and rebuild. Oops. So tear down and rebuild, you can have it as a sub underneath, say garage, and you have all the different types or job type names underneath garage. What are the different types of jobs you would do for a garage? You can have that as well. There's no hierarchy set up in here, but anytime you do have a hierarchy option, there's always a 5-level hierarchy, so it can get quite detailed. The job status, that's what we did in the preferences. So this is going to be a quoted phase. And then you can also have the start date, the projected end date, and then the end date. And filling this information in, of course, it's not required, but it does help you get better reports out of QuickBooks. So we'll click OK. I'm not going to put any start date in there. But let's say you want to have a quick view of that information without pulling a report, and maybe it's your accounts receivable person. They're receiving the final payment, and they want to quickly see, you know, if the status is correct, or the phase of that job is in there correct. So what you can do under the header is right-click on that header, and you can customize these columns. And you're going to see on the left-hand side all of the options that you can choose to show. I'm going to remove the attach unless you're using it. It doesn't have to be, you know, there. It's a great feature, by the way, but that's not what we're doing at this particular moment. So if you scroll down, you're going to see all of the different job features. So we have job status, job type, the projected ending date, the ending date, start date. But I'm going to choose job status because that'll show you that it's either quoted or invoiced in full. You can see the ones that, you know, obviously the extra L exceeded the 9 characters, but, you know, you can do your own little acronyms if you wanted to. So having all of this information visually right here is great. And then you can also run reports, which I'll also be showing you. So that's just one way that you can customize columns. Any of these headers, by the way, just as a side note, if you wanted to customize any of these columns, you can usually, I don't know why it's not there at the moment, but usually you can customize the columns anytime you have where you can right click on them. All right, so managing jobs and customizing the job reports. So under the, I just went over kind of the managing the jobs. It lets you add all of that information. I've already gone over that, so that's great. Now it's customizing the job report. So in the actual job, unlike the customer, there's quick links to quick report, open balance report, job profitability, the estimate versus actuals, and then in the contractor report, there's several that can be customized. So let's go in and look at those different reports. You'll notice if I click on the customer itself, I have several reports over on the right-hand side, and if you don't have that control panel moved over, you won't see it. It's going to be underneath that control panel. But if you had moved it or shrunk it down, you'll see that under the main customer, we have a quick report, open balance, you know, where you can show the estimates, and also the customer snapshot. But if I click on the garage, which is a job, it changes those report quick links. You have a quick report, which brings up any detail, whether it's a payment, an estimate, an invoice, all of those details. You have your job profitability, which is a quick click. And you also have your estimate versus actuals report. That's a quick click. So that's part of the actual job. Now you have a couple different sections for the contractor specific. Again, you're not going to see this in the Premier, excuse me, in the Pro, and you're not going to see this in the online. It's just available in the Premier and Enterprise. You have, when you've installed it as the contractor edition, you have the contractor specific reports, which there are several of the predefined reports. And then you also have the memorized report. So you have a memorized report group that you can create these job reports and save them. The job status report was one that, again, using the status options, those 5 different options, you can pull this report up, and let's say you want to have maybe not just all of them showing up on here, but you want to have one that filters out invoice in full. Well, when you have that report, you can go into customize and then filter, and if we go to job, we can quickly click on job status. And then we can select what job status is that we want. Now, again, you have to know what the translation was, because remember, I said you can't change the hard coding of what QuickBooks knows it as. It's just what you have it, what you want to see it as. So pending, you have to know that that's quoted. So you can see when I chose pending, you'll see quoted is what ends up filtering it down to. And once you've done that, what I usually recommend is if that's something that you're going to pull quite frequently, when you go and modify this report, you can say that this is just the quoted job status, and you can see that it changes it, and then you can memorize all of these reports. So you can have your invoice in full report, you can have your quoted report, you can have, whatever the closed report or invoiced in full, whatever, again, your job statuses are. So if you choose memorize, since this was already listed as a job status report, we don't want to replace it. We don't want to replace it with just the quoted one. We want to create a new one. So there'll be two. There'll be one with all of the jobs by status, and then we'll have each one individually. So this is the job status with just the quote. And I'm going to save that in that contractors reporting. So if I go back to reports now, let's say I close this out. If I go back to reports, and under the memorized report, under contractor, I'm now going to have that job status quote. So you can save all of your job status specific reports. And if you're not familiar with the memorized report groups, one of the big benefits is that you can have where you can process these multiple reports. So if you go to process multiple reports, you pick whatever the group is, and you can customize your own groups and create them. These are just the ones that come standard in QuickBooks. Under contractor, you'll see the reports that are there, and you can just choose to display or print those job status reports, or maybe you just want the profitability reports. You can cherry pick, or you can have them all selected. Maybe you have your weekly job meeting with your project managers. You can have those particular reports set up in a weekly meetings group and have those printed out or displayed to email or whatever you want to do with those every single week. Okay, so that's kind of one of the benefits of using those the memorized report list. And if you're one that has I don't know 100 reports, when you click on this and you want to clean that up, you can easily do that over when you click on the memorized report list. You can easily clean that up by creating a report group or taking the reports that might be like this outside of a group and then moving. Maybe you want to move this up into another area. Maybe you want to put it in the customers, not necessarily, but let's put it up in the company. So you move it up there, and then you can click and drag it in. Anytime you see those diamonds, that's what you can do with that the moving around with your mouse. It's a click and drag for those of you that are not familiar with that. Okay. Going into the different reports under the contractor reports, you can see that there's heavy on the job cost reports. If you're not, especially if you're not in the 2017 product, you won't see some of the great new features like the unpaid cost or job bills by vendor, the expenses not assigned to jobs. That's always something that's a great feature. And anything that, of course, is in here can be customized and then memorized in your memorized report group. So this just kind of gives you a launching pad to create those additional reports. Okay, so that was really quick. I knew that it wasn't going to take quite an hour. So at this point, I'm going to look to see if we have any questions in queue. Let me take a look. We do have one. Let me look. All right, are you able to do the exact same thing that y'all are doing with Mac? So Mac does not have all the functionality that the desktop edition has. So if you're looking for a solution on doing job costing on a computer, and you don't want to use the online because it doesn't meet all the criteria that a contractor would need, and you don't want to invest in the Mac edition because it doesn't have all the job costing functionality, then that would be an option, as I mentioned earlier, that we offer is the hosting. It's an economical way to get the desktop edition on the cloud, where you can have it on cross-platforms. So you can have it not only on your Mac, but you can have it on your iPad or your phone. I mean, I have it on my phone as well. So in a pinch, when I need to get an answer, excuse me, an answer for a customer very quickly, I can take my phone out, which is not even a plus size, it's the regular iPhone, I can take it out and I can log into my QuickBooks and get them an answer really quickly. So that's a great, great question. Let me see if there's any more. Okay, so Jessica, we'll be reaching out to you after. Let's see. A lot of questions. Which Intuit product code does this webinar cover? I believe we answered that, Jessica. Great question. So primarily this is going to be your Premier and your Enterprise PC edition. So that's the Premier and Enterprise are specific to PC. And Jessica agrees that the online does not do a great job with the Contractor edition. That's great. Good. All right. And difference between pay bills and write checks. That's a great question. I'll answer that. That was the last question. So let me go to the desktop or to the QuickBooks. So what the question was is what's the difference between writing checks and using the bills? Well, I like to explain it this way. You have certain let me go back to the home page. You have certain expenses that you want to capture in a time frame versus having an expense hit the books right when you create the check. So there's several different reasons why you would do bills and then pay bills, but just one of them right off the top is when you enter a bill into QuickBooks on an accrual basis, the date that you enter that bill in is when the expense gets recorded. And that helps when you're tracking jobs, especially in the construction world. You know, there's a fine line between accrual and cash, and usually it's called an other. It's like a hybrid of the two. And if you don't have an accountant that really knows construction, then I highly recommend, I mean, we have accountants that we can recommend that you get an accountant that is really familiar with the construction, because you might be building a home and you might have a bunch of invoices in the system that haven't been paid, but yet you have your materials maybe in a different month that you're now, if you have an accountant that shows on a cash basis or even an accrual basis, they may not, you might have a deposit of 30 or 40% that you haven't even started the job on, but you had an invoice in there that recorded that as income. So, you know, your bills are going to be important to offset that income on an accrual basis so that you don't get dinged for all the taxes. But then further, if you're properly managing your jobs and properly setting your jobs up in QuickBooks and running your accounting correctly, you should be able at the end of the year to pull any job that's open, again, going back to the status of, you know, the job status, anything that's open, take all the expenses and all the income and identify those separately on a tax return. And an accountant that's familiar with the construction world would know how to do that. So I hope that kind of answered your question where, let me go a little bit further on that. With the write checks, whatever date it is here is the exact date, regardless. Whereas when you have a bill in one month and then you pay it in a different month on an accrual basis, it goes by the entered date of the bill. So whatever date you put in that, that entry. So I hope that answers your questions, or that one particular question. I'm going to look back at the other questions, see if anything popped in here after. Let's see, can you hide? There was, let me look. We already have Mac. I thought I did answer, Jenny. So the question was, we already have a QB Mac. Is there any way we could kindly email me a response to the question I asked? Let me go back up and look. Are you able to do the exact same thing? So no, you're not able to do the exact same thing in Mac. Again, the only functions that you can do slight job costing, so you can assign the customer to expenses, but you don't have all of the other functions that you have. You don't have the, you know, the general liability and workers' compensation expiration dates. You don't have all of that functionality. And there's limited, I'm not even sure how many, you can do jobs. You can create a job from a customer, like that type of thing you can do, but not all the functions can you do in Mac. So hopefully that is enough of your answers. And if not, I can, you know, get you on a call, on a demo, and show you in your edition what you can do. I'd be happy to do that. Let's see. Can you hide the home page so it doesn't open every time you open QuickBooks? That's a great question. I'm going to show you a function that you can do. If you escape and you press your escape key and you go to this blank screen, a lot of people don't like that home page to pop up. And this is per user. Again, this is like a desktop preference. It's going to be a per user setting. But if you don't want that to pop up because it either takes too long, you just want to have, or maybe you just want to have a specific screen that comes up every time you open QuickBooks. It might be your, a report that you want to have open. Whatever it is, when you go and do what I'm going to show you, this is what's going to actually be what shows. So under Edit and Preferences, going again back to the preferences, it's under desktop view. It's not a my company preference, it's or not company preference, it's my preference. So again, having said that, you can do this in multi-user mode, and any one of your employees or users in QuickBooks can do the same thing, but they would have to do it on their own. It's not something that you can say apply to all the users, because it is only a personal preference for the logged in user. What you'd want to do is you want to click on Save Current Desktop. So whatever is open right now, when you do that, when you click on OK, this is what's going to be your new desktop when you come into your QuickBooks. So let me just make sure that there is no other questions that just popped in here. All right, I don't see any other questions. If there's any questions, if anybody wants to get them in really quick, I'd be happy to answer them. I see one came in. An electrical contractor, and we would like to have the capability to do job costing. I think that came in earlier. So job costing is definitely a functionality that a lot of the editions can do. Doesn't always do it as well as the desktop edition for Premier and Enterprise. But for the job costing, what a lot of people, I kind of get you started. This isn't meant for an entire job costing webinar, but we did have a little bit of extra time, so I'll show you just a little bit of how you can make sure that you're job costing correctly. So the first thing is that you have to set your items up correctly. And what I mean by that is, like, this is a sample file, and this is setting up your items based on like building a home. The first thing that you would do is you get plans and permits, and then you do your site work and excavation and everything. Well, when you double click on any one of these items, they should be set up in what's called a double-sided item. And when you first start a service item or even an other charge, you'll originally have a new item show up as a single-sided item. And you almost have to ignore what this little message says, because it may not be specifically applying to a subcontractor or a partner, but what this will let you do is it'll let you create or use the same item here for the purchase as well as the sale, so that you see a side-by-side comparison. I quoted the customer that it was going to be a $5,000 foundation, and we went over because we had to do another layer of brick that maybe they didn't know in advance. So now it's going to cost you more, even though you quoted it specifically to a customer. So you'll be able to see at the end of the day, what did you invoice your customer for excavation or bricklaying, whatever it is, and what does it cost you. So having said that, you would use the items in the expenses as well, because you're already using the item to invoice your customer. So having it as a double-sided item, you would assign it to the cost or an expense account, depends on what the item is, versus the sales and information would go on the revenue side. So when you create an invoice or a sales receipt, it will flow through to the revenue. So that's using the item. Now, the secondary part of that is to enter the bills or checks or credit cards for anything that's a site work. Let's just say that this was an electrician. It actually popped up, being in the sample file, it popped up on the items tab, but that's the most important thing, is that when you put the expenses in, and anything that you code to a customer should always be on the items tab. That's kind of like the rule of thumb of job costing, is that if you're expensing it to a customer, it must be an item, and your items must be set up correctly. You must have them set up as a double-sided item, so that when you put it in as an expense, it actually codes it to your profit and loss as an expense, versus on, again, the invoicing or sales receipt, it posted up to the revenue. So those are your two big things that you'll find when job costing. And so that when you're pulling those job costing reports, and this is kind of impromptu, so I'm not sure I'm going to find an actual job that has a lot of billing out of it. Let me just take a pick and see if I can find one. So that's actually a pretty good one. It doesn't have any revenue, or the revenue wasn't billed out correctly, but you can see here that the costs were used correctly and that they were used on the items tab. So that should this invoicing have been done correctly, and again, this one is not correct in the sample file, but had it been done correctly, you'd be able to see the cost, revenue, and then the actual difference of that. So I see a couple more questions popping in here. Let me look at those really quick. Which Intuit product code does the webinar go over? Oh, I looked at that one. All right, I saw some more in here. Okay, does integrate with Corrigo. So Corrigo is a field service software. A lot of electrical companies, or that go and do on-call work where you need a dispatch to dispatch them out, or it could be an AC repair company. That a lot of them use Field Service Manager. So Corrigo makes Field Service Manager. So QuickBooks Enterprise and Pro Premier, they all work with Corrigo, and we are actually resellers of Corrigo. So if you are interested in that, we would definitely like to talk to you about that. Next one, Linda asked, are you attending the National Builder Show in January? Yes, we are. We will be in the technology area. We were very lucky to at least squeeze in a 10 by 10 booth, so we will be there. And I think that was all of the questions. Those are great questions. Thank you, Jessica. She says she wants to work with us, so that's great. We look forward to working with you, Jessica. And any other questions, feel free to email us after the fact. And just kind of as a housekeeping item, I'm going to be converting the recording and then sending everyone out the link so you can actually see it again, should you need to see it again. So thank you all for attending the webinar. I have really enjoyed the time spent today, and we look forward to being of any assistance to you, whether you are looking for consulting, or you need to buy any products, or just need to ask us questions. We are a concierge service, so we are here to work with you and help you in any way that we can. So thank you all for attending, and I hope you all have a great rest of the week and a great weekend. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.